Okay, so today we're going deep on something I think we all deal with no matter what we're trying to achieve in life, and that's fear.
Yeah, fear. It's sort of a universal experience, right?
Totally. And we're going to look at it through this really interesting lens, Buddhist philosophy, and see what it has to say about fear, especially when it comes to the pursuit of wealth.
Because it's not always a straightforward relationship, right? You'd think maybe more wealth, less fear.
Exactly. And that's kind of what we're going to untangle in this deep dive, how fear is connected to wealth in ways we might not expect.
We'll be pulling from some key Buddhist teachings that really get to the heart of this relationship between fear and wealth and what it means to be truly wealthy.
All right, so to kick things off, let's start with this idea of fear as the shadow of wealth.
Ooh, I like that.
Right, it's like this really powerful image.
It is. It is.
What's the Buddhist perspective on this relationship?
We know how light and shadow, they always go together.
Right, can't have one without the other.
Exactly. And in this case, the light, you can think of that as our potential, our ambitions, everything we're striving for when we talk about wealth, both material wealth and like inner peace.
Okay, so the light is like the good stuff.
Yeah, the aspirations, the goal.
Yeah, and the shadow is...
The shadow that comes along with it is fear.
So it's not like this separate thing that we can just get rid of.
It's inherently linked. It's part of the process.
So if we're feeling fearful when we're going after something like that, could actually be a good sign.
It could be a sign that you're on the right track, that you're aiming for something truly meaningful.
Because you're stepping outside your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Yep.
You're pushing your boundaries, and that's where fear tends to show up.
Now, when we talk about wealth from a Buddhist perspective, it's not just about money, right?
Absolutely not. It's much broader than that.
So what does it encompass then?
It's about the richness of your mind, freedom from suffering, having a clear purpose, a deep sense of inner peace.
Okay, so that inner wealth is just as important, if not more important.
Definitely. And that's where this idea of fear as a gatekeeper comes in.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so explain that.
So imagine fear as this guardian at the entrance to this treasure of true wealth.
So it's testing us.
It is. It's making sure you're ready for what lies beyond.
I like that. So it's not just blocking our path.
Not necessarily. It's more like it's challenging us to step up to the plate to really examine our intentions and our commitment.
To prepare us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because without facing that gatekeeper, the journey might not lead to the kind of transformation that true wealth requires.
It's like that idea of facing your fears head on.
It is. It's about acknowledging them, understanding them, and then choosing to move forward despite them.
And you know, that reminds me of that core Buddhist teaching about being present in the moment.
Ah, yes, the power of the present moment.
Because fear is something we experience right now. It's not dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
Right, it's here in this very instant.
Which maybe means it's trying to tell us something important right now.
Absolutely, it's like a signal, a call to attention.
And you know the story of Siddhartha Gautama facing Mara under the Bodhi tree. That feels so relevant here.
Ah, yes, the classic battle with temptation and fear.
Because Mara throws everything he can at Siddhartha, right?
Oh yeah, all those temptations of power and pleasure, or armies of fear trying to derail him from his path to enlightenment.
And how does Siddhartha respond?
Not with aggression, but with this incredible gesture, the Bhumisparsha Mudra.
Touching the earth.
Exactly, and it's so powerful because it's an act of grounding and acceptance.
He's not fighting the fear, he's acknowledging it.
He's saying, yes, I see you, fear, I feel you, but I'm not going to let you control me.
And by doing that, he's tapping into a different kind of strength.
Exactly, a strength that comes from within, from acceptance and resilience.
And that's ultimately what leads to his enlightenment.
Right, it's the transformation of fear into a source of power.
So the key takeaway here is that fear doesn't have to be this enemy that we constantly try to conquer.
It's more about changing our relationship to it, learning to dance with it.
Yeah, meeting it with mindfulness and courage.
Exactly, and when we do that, its power to paralyze us diminishes.
And it can actually become fuel for growth.
Absolutely, it can propel us forward in ways we never thought possible.
And you know, it makes me think about all those people we admire who've achieved incredible things.
The ones who seem fearless.
Right, but then you hear someone like Elon Musk talk about his experiences and it's like, wait a minute.
He feels fear too.
He does, and he's been very open about it, but he also has that famous quote, when something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor.
He's not letting fear stop him.
He's harnessing it as fuel for innovation.
It's like that Buddhist idea we were talking about, aspiration, creating their shadow of fear.
Because he's aiming so high, the stakes are so high, the fear is inevitably there.
And instead of running from it, he's using it.
So he's not actually fearless, he's just incredibly courageous.
Exactly. Courage is not the absence of fear, it's acting despite the fear.
Okay, so let's bring in another key Buddhist concept here, impermanence, Annika.
Ah, yes, the ever-changing nature of reality.
How does understanding that everything is in flux affect our relationship with fear?
Well, Buddhist teachings tell us that a lot of our suffering comes from clinging to things staying the same.
We want things to be fixed and permanent,
We crave that sense of security and control.
but the reality is,
Everything is constantly changing.
and that includes.
Our successes, our failures, our feelings, even our fears.
So if we can really internalize that both the good and the bad are temporary,
It can help loosen the grip of fear.
because we realize that even if things go wrong, it's not the end of the world.
Exactly. It's just a phase of transition.
It's not permanent.
And that realization can be incredibly liberating.
It allows us to take more risks, to be more bold.
Because we're not so afraid of failure.
We know that even if we stumble, we can get back up.
And that failure itself might be a stepping stone to something even greater.
So we talked about this exercise of visualizing fear and then transmuting its energy.
Yeah, that's a powerful technique for shifting our perspective.
How does that work?
First, you acknowledge the fear. You say, hey, I see you. I feel you. Thanks for trying to protect me, but I got this.
So you're not pushing it away.
You're welcoming it in a way, but you're also setting a boundary.
And then,
You visualize it transforming. Maybe imagine it as a dark cloud turning into golden light.
so you're changing the association
You're no longer linking fear with paralysis, but with potential energy.
with wisdom, with strength.
Exactly. You're reclaiming that energy and using it to fuel your growth.
So I think the big takeaway from this first part of our deep dive is that fear isn't necessarily an obstacle to our aspirations.
It's more like a companion, a shadow that's always there.
And learning to embrace it, to understand its message, that's a crucial step on the path to true wealth.
And remember, true wealth isn't just about material possessions.
It's about inner peace, clarity, purpose, resilience, all those qualities that make life truly rich and meaningful.
And those are often forged in the fires of our fears.
Exactly. So in the next part, we'll dig into why fear can feel so heavy, so overwhelming, and explore more tools for working with it.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Now, when we talk about why fear can have such a hold on us, the Buddhist concept of attachment is really key.
Attachment, yeah, that's a big one.
It's like we get so fixated on specific outcomes,
We want things to go a certain way, we attach to that vision.
and when that doesn't happen, or we're afraid it won't happen,
The fear can become all-consuming.
and then we have this concept of shunyata, emptiness,
Yeah, that could be a tricky one for people to wrap their heads around.
because it sounds a bit like nothingness.
Right. It can evoke those feelings of nihilism, but it's not about that at all.
So what is it about then?
Shunyata points to the interconnectedness of everything, the fluid, ever-changing nature of reality.
Okay, so it's not that things are meaningless,
No, it's that they're constantly in flux, constantly evolving.
and that includes our fears.
Our fears, our sense of self, our circumstances, it's all interconnected and impermanent.
So how does that help us with fear?
Well, when we cling to rigid ideas about ourselves or the world, that's when suffering arises.
We're resisting the natural flow of things,
We're trying to hold on to something that's inherently unstable.
and that creates tension and fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when we embrace emptiness, we see that fear isn't this solid, unchanging entity.
It's also part of this interconnected web.
It's fluid, malleable, subject to change.
So understanding shunyata helps us see that fear is less absolute,
More like a wave that rises and falls.
that we can learn to ride.
Exactly. It's not about eliminating fear, but about changing our relationship to it.
Now, you mentioned this metaphor of the murky water in a jar.
Ah, yes. That's a good one for illustrating how detachment can work.
So explain that.
Imagine you have a jar of water that's all cloudy and stirred up.
Full of sediment.
Right, and that sediment represents all the intense emotions, anxieties, the stories we tell ourselves when we're gripped by fear.
So what do?
We stop trying to stir it up. We stop resisting.
We just observe.
We sit with the jar and we watch as the sediment naturally settles.
And as it
The
settles.
water becomes clearer. We can see through it more easily.
And that's what happens with fear when we stop resisting it.
We can start to see it for what it truly is, just a collection of thoughts, emotions, sensations.
Not this insurmountable monster.
Exactly, and that can be a huge relief.
Okay, so let's get practical here. Let's apply this to a specific feel, something a lot of people struggle with: financial instability.
Ah, yes, that's a big one.
Where does attachment come into play there?
Often the attachment is to security, to control over our financial situation.
We want to feel safe and secure.
We crave that certainty that we'll always have enough.
But the reality is,
Nothing is guaranteed.
and clinging to that illusion of control.
It just fuels the fear.
So how can the concept of emptiness help us shift our perspective here?
By embracing emptiness, we can start to see uncertainty not as a threat, but as an opportunity.
As a natural part of life.
Right, it's about accepting that things will ebb and flow.
And that's okay.
It is, in fact, it can be incredibly empowering because it forces us to be adaptable, to be resourceful.
Instead of freaking out when things don't go according to plan,
We can ask ourselves, okay, how can I adapt to this situation?
what new skills can I develop?
Who can I reach out to for support?
It's about turning that fear into a catalyst for growth.
Exactly, instead of letting it paralyze us.
Now, the parable of the young monk Ananda and the Buddha encountering the snake.
Yes, that's a classic story about how our reactions can create more suffering.
So remind us what happens in that parable.
So Ananda and the Buddha are walking through the forest, and they come across a man who's frozen in fear.
What's going on?
There's a venomous snake blocking his path,
Oh no.
and the man is terrified. He doesn't know what to do.
Fight or flight?
Exactly, he's stuck in that paralysis.
So what does the Buddha say?
He tells Ananda to go find a wise traveler who's passing by and ask for advice.
Okay, and what does the wise traveler say?
He says, don't fight the snake, don't run away, just gently guide it off the path.
With calmness and wisdom.
Exactly, and that's the key here. Our reactions to fear can often make things worse.
We either attack or we run away.
But sometimes the wisest course of action is to simply acknowledge the fear
Yeah.
and then gently nudge it aside.
And that's a skill that can be applied to all sorts of challenges in life.
Absolutely. Think about entrepreneurs who panic when they hit a roadblock
Yeah.
versus those who see it as a learning opportunity.
It's the difference between letting fear control you and using it as fuel for growth.
And that brings us to the fascinating intersection of ancient wisdom and modern psychology.
Yeah, because it's amazing how these Buddhist principles align with what researchers are discovering today.
It really is like Dr. Kelly McGonigal's work on stress.
Oh yeah, the upside of stress.
She shows that stress, much like fear, can actually be beneficial.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's all about how we perceive it.
So if we see stress as a sign that we're engaged, that we're pushing our boundaries,
It can actually be energizing.
instead of debilitating.
It's that shift in mindset from I'm scared to this is exciting, I'm growing.
so simple yet so powerful.
Right? It's about reframing the narrative.
Now, you mentioned this step-by-step ritual for embracing fear.
Yes, this is a great way to put these principles into practice.
Okay, break it down for us.
First step, acknowledge attachments.
So what does that mean?
Take some time to really reflect on what's fueling your fear, what are you clinging to?
Like if you're afraid of not having enough money, is it tied to your self-worth?
Or maybe a fear of judgment from others.
Get to the root of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Step 2, practice detachment meditation.
Okay, how do we do that?
Visualize your fear as a cloud drifting across the sky. Just observe it without judgment. Notice its shape, its color,
See it as separate from you.
and recognize that, like a cloud, it'll eventually pass.
So you're creating distance.
You're not getting caught up in the storm.
Step 3.
Reframe the narrative.
So instead of seeing fear as a negative,
You look for the potential benefit, the hidden gift,
so like the fear of rejection could teach you resilience.
or the fear of taking a risk might force you to be more prepared.
Okay, step 4.
Take one small action.
Break it down into manageable steps.
Exactly, and commit to doing one small thing that moves you forward, even if it feels a little scary.
Because action is the antidote to fear.
It gets us out of our heads and into the world.
And finally,
Cultivate compassion toward yourself.
be kind to yourself.
Acknowledge that fear is a normal human experience and that you're doing your best.
No need to beat yourself up.
Exactly. Self-compassion is essential on this journey.
So this ritual, it's about actively engaging with fear.
Instead of letting it control us.
And by doing that, we're building our inner wealth.
Our resilience, our clarity, our capacity for compassion.
And that inner wealth can then attract greater external abundance.
Because when we're aligned internally, it tends to ripple outwards.
All right, so now let's move into this fascinating paradox. What happens to fear when we achieve success?
Ah, yes, the evolution of fear.
You'd think once you reach a certain level of wealth or achievement, fear would just disappear.
But it rarely works that way, does it?
Not from what we've seen, and the Buddhist perspective really sheds light on this.
It suggests that fear doesn't vanish. It transforms.
It becomes a different kind of companion.
And learning to dance with this evolved fear is a key part of true prosperity,
So let's unpack this, starting with the Buddhist teaching of dukkha.
which is often translated as suffering or dissatisfaction.
And what does Buddhism say about dukkha?
It teaches that dukkha arises from our resistance to reality, to the ever-changing nature of things.
We want things to be permanent. We want to avoid discomfort.
But that's just not how life works.
And often our pursuit of wealth is driven by this desire to eliminate all discomfort.
To create this perfect bubble of security and happiness.
But that's an illusion.
It is, and it's often rooted in mistaking the symptom fear for the underlying cause attachment.
So true wealth isn't about achieving some fear-free state.
No, it's about cultivating freedom through fear.
It's about learning to live fully and authentically, even with uncertainty.
And the metaphor of the lotus flower is so perfect here.
Oh yeah, the lotus growing in the mud.
Exactly, our fears.
Yeah.
Those are the mud, the fertile ground from which our greatest achievements can blossom.
Without the mud, there's no lotus.
Exactly. The challenges, the struggles, they're essential for growth.
And this ties into the concept of the middle way.
That balance, that sweet spot between extremes.
So when it comes to fear and wealth,
The middle way is about neither suppressing our fears nor letting them rule our lives.
it's about acknowledging them, understanding them, and then moving forward with wisdom and intention.
Like a tightrope walker.
Who uses the fear of falling to stay balanced and focused.
Exactly. The fear becomes a guide, a source of information.
And you know, the example of Oprah Winfrey is so inspiring here.
Oh yeah, she's such a powerful example of someone who's achieved incredible success, but is still open about her struggles with fear.
Because even with all her wealth and influence,
She still battles with those feelings of inadequacy, of not being good enough.
and she's spoken about it so candidly.
She has. And her quote, "Turn your wounds into wisdom," really captures this transformation of fear into a source of strength.
It's about taking those difficult experiences, those encounters with fear, and using them as fuel for growth.
It's about turning those wounds into wisdom, into compassion, into purpose.
And that's a different kind of wealth.
It's the wealth that comes from inner resilience, from overcoming challenges.
And you know what's interesting is that the Buddhist perspective suggests that as we grow and evolve, so do our fears.
Absolutely. The things that scared us at the beginning of our journey might not even faze us later on.
And new fears might emerge.
Fears that are more aligned with our expanded sense of self.
So like someone who's just starting out might be afraid of financial instability.
But someone who's already achieved financial success might then fear complacency or losing their passion.
So those evolved fears, they're not necessarily a bad thing.
They can actually be a sign of progress.
A sign that we're continuing to stretch our boundaries.
And that's where the principle of dependent origination comes in.
Pratitya samutpada.
It teaches that everything arises in dependence on other factors.
So our fears, they're not just random. They're connected to our past experiences, our current beliefs, our aspirations.
Exactly, and that means we have the power to shape how our fears evolve.
By working on ourselves, by changing our beliefs, by shifting our aspirations.
We can influence the nature of our fears.
Okay, so let's talk about those 3 transformative practices you mentioned for navigating this evolving relationship with fear.
All right, so we have radical acceptance, reframing failure, and cultivating daily courage.
Let's start with radical acceptance.
This is all about mindfulness, about being fully present with our fear without judgment.
So when fear arises,
We don't try to push it away or pretend it's not there.
we simply acknowledge it.
We feel the sensations in our body. We name them, we observe them with curiosity.
So we're creating space.
We're not getting swept away by the fear, we're allowing it to be there without letting it control us.
And by doing that,
We can start to see that fear is just a temporary experience, a wave that will eventually crest and break.
okay, next up, reframing failure.
This is about shifting our perspective on setbacks, seeing them not as the end of the world, but as valuable feedback.
As opportunities for learning.
Exactly. Every mistake, every failure, it's a chance to course correct, to improve, to grow.
So instead of getting discouraged,
We get curious. We ask ourselves, what can I learn from this? How can I do better next time?
and you mentioned keeping a failure journal.
Yeah, that can be a really powerful tool. Write down your mistakes, the lessons you learn, how you plan to adapt in the future.
So you're turning those failures into stepping stones.
You're building resilience, you're creating a growth mindset.
Okay, and finally, cultivating daily courage.
This is about taking small but consistent actions that push us outside our comfort zone.
So even if it's something that makes us a little nervous,
We do it anyway.
because those small acts of courage,
They build up over time, they create a momentum of bravery.
and you suggested pairing this with gratitude.
Yes. Each day, Take a moment to reflect on the challenges you faced and celebrate your willingness to confront them.
So you're focusing on the positive.
You're acknowledging your own strength and resilience.
And that can be incredibly empowering.
It can help you see fear not as an obstacle, but as a threshold to cross a doorway to something greater.
So ultimately, these practices, they're all about transforming our relationship with fear.
From one of resistance and avoidance to one of acceptance and even appreciation.
Because when we can do that,
Fear becomes a source of energy, a catalyst for growth, a guide on our path to true wealth.
and true wealth, as we've been saying, is not just about money, it's about the richness of our inner lives.
It's about resilience, clarity, purpose, compassion, those qualities that make life truly meaningful.
And those qualities, they're often forged in the fires of our fears.
So embrace the challenges, the uncertainties, they're part of the journey.
And remember that fear is often a sign that you're on the right track, that you're aiming for something truly worthwhile.
And with that in mind, I'd like to leave you with a final thought.
Oh yes, our provocative question for the listener.
If fear is the shadow of wealth, then what treasures are waiting for you in the light?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Take some time to reflect on that. Where's your fear leading you? What potential is it revealing?
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into fear and wealth through the lens of Buddhist philosophy.
It's been a pleasure exploring these concepts with you, and we hope you've gained some valuable insights along the way.
Remember that the journey of understanding and embracing fear is ongoing, and there's always more to learn and discover.
Be kind to yourself, be courageous, and keep striving towards your truest, most authentic self.
Until next time, take care.